She came home to find strangers setting up a wedding in her backyard. Flowers, chairs, a string quartet, all arranged by people who never once asked her name. Maren Holloway had lived in the Cedarfield Estates subdivision for 11 years. And in all that time, she had never missed a single mortgage payment, never let her lawn go brown, never parked a second car on the street past the HOA's arbitrary 9 o'clock cutoff. She had followed every rule in the 47-page Cedarfield Community Standards Handbook, a document she had actually read cover to cover twice, because she believed that order was not oppression. She believed that community meant something. She believed, perhaps naively, that the people elected to govern her neighborhood shared that belief. She was wrong about that last part. The morning it began was a Saturday in late April, the kind of morning that smells like cut grass and possibility. Maren had driven 3 hours to visit her sister in Asheville, planning to return Sunday evening. She had left her house in perfect condition. Dishes done, plants watered, a lamp on a timer in the front window. What she had not done, because it had never once occurred to her as something she needed to do, was tell anyone she would be gone for the weekend. She got the first text at 11:14 Saturday morning from her neighbor across the street, a quiet retired teacher named Odell Ferris, who was 71 years old and had never once texted anyone anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Maren, there are people in your backyard. Quite a few of them. I think you should call me. She stared at her phone in the passenger seat of her sister, Cora's Subaru, and read the message 3 times. Then she called him. Odell, what do you mean, people in my backyard? I mean people, he said. Setting up tables. White tablecloths. There's a man with a ladder putting something on your pergola. What are they putting on my pergola? Looks like flowers. Maren, there's a tent going up in your side yard. She heard herself make a sound that wasn't quite a word. Her sister glanced over from the driver's seat. Who authorized this? Maren asked, though she already felt the answer forming in her stomach like something cold. I don't know. I knocked on the door. A woman told me the HOA arranged it. She said it was all approved. He paused. She was not particularly polite about it. Maren ended the call and sat for exactly 4 seconds in silence before she said, Turn around, Cora. What? Turn the car around. I need to go home. Cora Holloway was 3 years younger than Maren, an attorney who specialized in real estate law and had, on multiple occasions, warned her older sister that Cedarfield's HOA operated with what she called an unusual degree of confidence for an entity with no legal training. Maren had always laughed this off. She was not laughing now. They drove back mostly in silence, except for the 40 minutes Maren spent on her phone pulling up every document she could find related to Cedarfield Estates' HOA structure, the bylaws, the CC&Rs, the community use policy, and the most recent meeting minutes she could access through the Cedarfield resident portal. She was looking for any language, any clause, subsection, or amendment that would allow the homeowners association to use a privately owned residential property without the owner's consent. She found nothing. Not a suggestion. Not a gray area. Not even sloppy language that could be creatively interpreted. What she did find, buried in the meeting minutes from 7 months ago, was a vote, 3 members in favor, 1 abstaining, 1 absent, to establish what the minutes called a community event hosting program, described as a way to leverage premium residential properties for neighborhood enrichment events. The motion had been approved. The details were vague. The homeowners had never been notified. By the time they pulled into Cedarfield Estates at 3:40 in the afternoon, the wedding was already well underway. Maren sat in the passenger seat and looked at her own property. There were perhaps 80 people in her backyard, dressed in pastel and linen, holding champagne flutes. A string quartet had been set up near the garden she had planted with her own hands over the course of 4 years. A woman in a white dress was standing beneath Marin's pergola, which had been draped in wisteria that was not Marin's wisteria. A man was officiating. Someone was crying. It was, objectively, a beautiful wedding dot. It was happening in Marin's backyard. Without her knowledge or permission, she got out of the car. Cora said, "Marin, wait. I'm not going to make a scene," Marin said. "I'm going to ask a question." She walked to the side gate of her own property, which was standing open, and found a woman with a clipboard near the catering station. The woman was perhaps 45, brisk and efficient, wearing a sitter-filled HOA lanyard. "Excuse me," Marin said. The woman looked up. "This is a private event. This is my private property." The woman blinked. "I'm sorry? My name is Marin Holloway. This is my house. My backyard. My pergola. I'd like to know who gave you permission to be here." The woman's expression shifted through several stages: surprise, recalibration, and then something that looked unsettlingly like practiced confidence. "The HOA authorized this venue for today's event. It's part of our community hosting program. All homeowners in the development are subject to the program. I was never notified. Notification isn't required under the current policy." Marin looked at her for a long moment. "What's your name?" "Diane Prout. I'm on the HOA board." "How long have you been on the board, Diane?" 4 years. "And in those 4 years, have you ever used anyone else's property this way?" Diane Prout's chin lifted slightly. "This is the program's inaugural event. So my house is the test case. We selected properties that met the aesthetic criteria for. I want everyone off my property," Marin said. Her voice was completely level. "Right now." Diane Prout's expression hardened. "Ms. Holloway, I understand this is surprising, but the event is in progress. There's a ceremony happening. These are real people. Whose ceremony is this?" A beat. "The Kessler-Vance wedding." "Do the Kesslers and Vances live in Cedarfield?" Another beat, slightly longer. "No, they are guests of a board member." Marin stood very still. "So my property was used for the wedding of people who don't even live in this community. At whose request?" Diane Prout did not answer immediately. Behind her, the string quartet had shifted into something slow and romantic. Someone laughed. A cork popped. "At whose request, Diane?" Board President Gerald Fitch extended the invitation. Marin nodded once. Then she took out her phone and called 911. Gerald Fitch was a man who had spent 12 years accumulating the specific kind of small-town power that makes a person believe they are untouchable. He was 63, recently retired from a career in commercial real estate, and had served as HOA board president for the past 6 years on the strength of low voter turnout and an uncanny ability to outlast anyone who challenged him at community meetings. He was tan in the way that people who golf too much are tan. He wore Cedarfield polo shirts to formal occasions. He had, by most accounts, never been told no by anyone who mattered to him. He was standing near the bar cart that had been set up alongside Marin's raised garden beds when she approached him, having located him through the crowd by asking 3 strangers in succession. He had a drink in his hand and was laughing at something when she stopped 3 feet in front of him. "Mr. Fitch." He turned. He did not recognize her at first, which told her everything she needed to know about how little the board thought of individual homeowners. Then something shifted behind his eyes, a small recalibration, the awareness of a problem arriving. "Ms. Holloway," he said. His tone was warm, the reflexive warmth of a man who had smoothed over many situations with charm alone. "I didn't realize you'd be back today." You thought I'd be gone," she said. "And you use my property anyway. Now, Marin, Miss Holloway." He smiled. The kind of smile that was meant to make the other person feel unreasonable. This is a community initiative. Your property was selected because it's beautiful, which is a testament to how well you've maintained it. You should be proud. I've called the police, she said. The smile stayed on his face for almost 2 full seconds after her words landed before it began to dissolve. I've also called an attorney, she continued. She's standing at my front gate right now. Gerald Fitch set his drink down on her garden bedwall, on the stone edge of the thing she had built with her own hands, and looked at her with an expression that was transitioning from charm into something colder. That's an overreaction, Gerald. She said his name the way a person says a word they've looked up and confirmed the definition of. You used my home without asking, without notifying me, for a private wedding, for people who don't live here, on behalf of yourself, using a board policy that was never disclosed to residents. That's not a community initiative. That's trespass. The CC and RSDO not permit this. I've read them. My attorney has read them. There is no language in the Cedarfield governing documents that grants the HOA access to private property for commercial or social events. She paused. But there is language about what happens when board members abuse their authority. 2 police officers arrived at the side gate at 4:17 p.m. Cora Holloway met them and walked them through the gate and across the yard to where Merrim was standing. The wedding guests had begun to notice something was wrong. The string quartet stopped playing mid-phrase. The bride, still in her white dress, was watching from. The 45 minutes passed. The ceremony concluded, abbreviated and hollowed out by the awareness of what had happened. The bride and groom exchanging vows with the kind of forced composure that people perform when everything has gone wrong and they are trying to salvage something from the wreckage. Maren sat on her own front porch and did not watch. She answered emails. She ate a granola bar. She let Cora talk her through the immediate legal steps when the last car left and the last catering table was folded into a white van. Maren walked back through her own house and out into her backyard and stood in it alone for a long time. The wisteria they'd hung on her pergola had been left behind. Still draped across the wood she'd stained herself 3 summers ago. There were impressions in her lawn from the tent stakes. Someone had moved the ceramic pots she kept near the garden wall and not replaced them. A champagne glass, empty, had been left on the edge of her stone-raised bed, right where Gerald Fitch had set his drink. She picked it up. She stood there, holding it, looking at what they had made of her space without ever once thinking of her as a person who lived in it. She put the glass in her recycling bin, went inside, and sat down at her kitchen table with her laptop and every document she had downloaded. Then she started writing. The letter she sent to every homeowner in Cedarfield Estates was not angry. Maren had written the draft 3 times, and the 3rd version was the one that landed. Precise, factual, chronological. She described what had happened without editorializing. She cited the meeting minutes from 7 months ago, the specific motion, the 3-member vote, the absent board member who had later told her she hadn't known the program applied to private homes. She included the relevant sections of the CC and RS. She included a time-stamped photograph of the police officers in her backyard, which Odell Ferris had taken from his front window and texted to her without being asked. She sent it on a Tuesday morning. By Thursday, she had heard from 26 of her 43 neighbors. Not all of them were sympathetic. 2 told her she was making a mountain of nothing. 1 suggested she should be flattered, but 23 of them were angry, and 7 of those were incandescent. Several had not known the community hosting program existed. 3 had recently received vague notices about property assessments they hadn't understood and now wondered if they were related. 1 woman, a landscape architect named Priya Azay, who lived 3 streets over, told Marin that she had noticed 2 men photographing her backyard from the street 2 weeks ago and had assumed they were from the county. They were measuring my pergola, Priya said. Over the phone, her voice flat with the specific fury of someone who's just understood something they didn't want to understand. They were figuring out if it was big enough for another event, Marin said. Yours wasn't the first choice, Priya said. I found out from Diane Pruitt's assistant. She left a voicemail on the wrong number. My pergola was actually their first choice, but they decided my lawn wasn't level enough. A pause. They had criteria, Marin. They had a spreadsheet. Marin closed her eyes. They have done this before? She asked. No, but they had planned to. Yours was the first. They had 6 more properties shortlisted. The silence that followed was very long. Send me that voicemail, Marin said. Cora had been practicing real estate law for 9 years, and she knew a civil complaint when she saw the outlines of one forming. What Marin had, a documented unauthorized entry, a recorded HOA policy that exceeded the board's authority under the governing documents, a voicemail indicating premeditation and a larger scheme, and more than 20 homeowners who felt deceived was not nothing. It was, Cora told her over the phone that Thursday night, potentially quite significant. This isn't just about your backyard anymore, Cora said. This is a pattern of the board acting outside its authority. And in HOA law, when a board acts outside its authority and causes harm to homeowners, the individual board members can be held personally liable, not just the association. Gerald Fitch specifically, Marin said. He authorized the event. He selected the property. He extended the invitation to non-residents for what appears to be a personal favor. Yes, Gerald Fitch specifically. Marin thought about the way he had set his drink on her garden wall. She thought about his smile and how long it had taken to leave his face. What does personally liable mean in practice? She asked. It means that if we file a lawsuit, we name him. Not the HOA abstractly. Him as an individual. And it means he can't use HOA insurance to cover his defense. He pays for his own attorney. He faces judgment with his own assets. And the other board members who voted for the program? Potentially, yes, depending on what the voicemail shows about their involvement. Marin said nothing for a moment. Then she said, I want to give them a chance to fix it first. Cora was quiet. Why? Because I believe in that. I still believe in it. She paused. And because I want them to say no? The letter Marin sent to the HOA board was formal, delivered via certified mail and email simultaneously, with Cora's law firm letterhead at the top. It requested 4 things: a written acknowledgement that the community hosting program exceeded the board's authority under the CC&R, a formal apology distributed to all Cedarfield homeowners, the immediate dissolution of the program, and a commitment to hold a full community meeting within 30 days to review and revise the board's governance policies. It gave the board 14 days to respond. Gerald Fitch responded in 6. His letter, also formal, was 3 pages long and had been written by an HOA attorney, one of the cheaper ones. Cora noted, which told them something about how seriously he was taking the threat. The letter argued that the community hosting program was within the board's authority under a broad reading of the section of the CC&RS that permitted the board to take actions necessary for the enhancement and betterment of the community. It called Marin's interpretation overly narrow. It described the wedding event as a minor scheduling misunderstanding. It offered, as a concession, a personal apology from Gerald Fitch, delivered in a private meeting, and a $50 credit toward her next HOA dues payment. $50. Cora read it aloud over the phone and then stopped and said, $50. Yes, Marin said. He'd paid his attorney more than $50 to write this letter. Almost certainly. He's not taking this seriously. No, Marin said. He's not. She was quiet for a moment. File it. The complaint was filed in county civil court on a Friday morning, 17 days after Gerald Fitch's letter arrived. It named the Cedarfield Estates Homeowners Association. Gerald Fitch in his personal capacity, Diane Pruitt in her personal capacity, and the two other board members who had voted in favor of the community hosting program. It alleged unauthorized entry, conversion of property, breach of fiduciary duty, and civil conspiracy. It sought compensatory damages, injunctive relief prohibiting the program, and attorney's fees. Cora also filed a complaint with the state's Department of Consumer Affairs, which regulated HOA governance in their state, citing the board's failure to disclose the program to residents and its use of a policy vote to circumvent homeowner rights. That was not a lawsuit. It was an investigation trigger. It would move slowly, but it would move. On the same day the complaint was filed, Priya Ase organized a community meeting, not the HOS meeting, but a separate gathering at the community center, which any resident could use. Booked through the county parks department rather than the HOA, 31 homeowners attended. 7 sent proxies. Gerald Fitch did not attend. Diane Pruitt sat in the back and said nothing for the first half hour. Marin stood at the front of the room and told the story simply, the way she had written it, without drama or embellishment. She told them about coming home and finding 80 strangers in her backyard. She told them about the clipboard and the lanyard. She told them about Odell's text message and the champagne glass on her garden wall. She told them about the spreadsheet, 6 more properties, shortlisted. Criteria for lawn, flatness and pergola dimensions. She watched their faces. There was something that happened in a room when people understood. All at once, that something they had trusted had been quietly working against them. It wasn't loud. It was a kind of stillness, a collective recalibration. And then it became something else. A retired contractor named Wes Bautista raised his hand and said, "What do we do?" Marin looked at him. "You have the right to call a special meeting and vote to remove board members for cause. Under the CC&RS, you need signatures from 30% of homeowners to trigger a special election. How many is that?" 14 households. Wes Bautista looked around the room. "We've got more than that right here." The petition circulated for 5 days. It came back with 31 signatures, representing 28 households. Priya Ase drove it to the HOA's registered agent herself and photographed the delivery. Under Cedarfield's bylaws, a special election had to be held within 60 days of a valid petition. Gerald Fitch hired a second attorney, a better one this time, who sent a letter arguing that the petition was procedurally defective because it had been circulated without board approval. Cora responded in 2 paragraphs, pointing out that the CC&RS did not require board approval for a homeowner-initiated petition, and that this was, in fact, the entire point of the Provis.